guys, this is Juju Talk Sports. That's Jose Corral. This is 49 Reasons to Listen. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, faithful for all fantastic, wonderful Niners content on today's episode. So we had a little bit of shocking news this weekend, a little bit of disappointing news, a little bit of news that depending on where you are, you may have wanted to be tempted to throw your fist against the nearest drywall, particularly if your name was Kyle. Sorry, Kyles. But anyway, Jamal Adams is officially in division, but not with the Niners. He is going to be up with the 12s in Seattle. So initial reaction when you heard the news that Seattle acquired Jamal Adams?
I think the punch in the wall reference was perfect. That kind of explained it for me as well. I was kind of looking for the closest thing that I could punch and I wouldn't break my hand with. It was kind of shocking, but we originally saw a list of 7 teams that he originally had told the Jets where he would be desired to get traded to, and we saw the Seahawks were also on that list. I'd never thought that they were the favorites to land Jamal Adams. I always thought of them maybe like a dark horse. I definitely always thought the Niners having a better shot at landing Jamal Adams, but he is in the division now. He is with what is expected to be, especially now that they have him, what is expected to be our biggest contenders for the division. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with an already pretty decent defense. Obviously, the Seahawks, they're not the Legion of Boom defense that they were in the past. But now when you bring a guy into that secondary with the type of talent level and the type of play that he's been able to show in the NFL, that Jamal Adams has been able to show, it's kind of scary, man. I'm not going to completely lie and say that, okay, we still have the better squad, which I still believe we probably have the better roster. But once your division rivals get a player like that, it's kind of hard not to be a little bit worried and not to be a little bit scared, especially for an organization who's been doing very well this past decade. Once you add a talent like that who might be there by sticking around, who might be sticking around for the future, you never know how it really will play out. But at least for this year, for 2020, I'm a little bit scared. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it definitely in the short term, you have to think about it in 2020 value because the Seahawks, they had to give up a ton to get Jamal Adams on their team. 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick next year, as well as their previously starting safety, Bradley McDougald. So that's a tough package. And with that said, should the Niners have matched that trade package?
With that being said, as much as I love Jamal Adams and love his game the past couple of years, the way he's been able to play, no, I don't. I think they gave a little bit too much. 2 first-round picks for a safety, plus a starting safety. The equivalent for us would have been the 2 first-rounders and then the second-rounder, probably Kwaski Tart. I wouldn't have never given up that much for one single player in Jamal Adams. I do understand his talent level. I do understand that he might be, at this young of age, probably the best safety in the league. But with that being said, I still think they overpaid a little bit too much for him. They gave New York a little bit too much, especially because, with the situation that Jamal Adams had with the Jets, he had the leverage. They had it. If not, he was gone. He didn't want to be there anymore. So he had the leverage. I feel like they didn't really have to give him that much, as much as they really did, to get Jamal Adams out of their hands. But they did. They ended up having to sacrifice 2 first-round picks. You never know. A first-round pick in the future could turn into another Jamal Adams. That's the dangers of giving those types of early picks to a team. So I'm not too sure if the Niners were in a position to ever really get him. There have been some reports where John Lynch never really even made a call to the Jets.
Just about to ask that. Just about to ask you on that one.
Never made a call to the Jets. So I think even the front office always thought that, okay, getting a guy like Jamal Adams, we probably were going to have to give up a little bit too much.
Well, okay, so yes, speaking of that civil war on Niners faithful Twitter that occurred, so does it surprise you to hear that John Lynch never made a call? Because we did hear that report way back when Jamal Adams was potentially going to maybe picking up steam with the Niners, yada, yada, that from Grant Cohen. So we've seen some back and forth there. Tell me, do you believe that he didn't pick up the phone to at least say, hey, what are you giving Jamal Adams up for? I mean, I feel like you have to at least pick up the phone. They picked up the phone for Brady this offseason. I think they could pick it up for Adams.
I was surprised to kind of see those initial reports of John Lynch not picking up the phone just because of how aggressive he's been the first few years in San Francisco with dealing with trying to get with guys onto the roster, especially with trading guys. So I was really surprised. I think it's worth a shot. I think it is worth a shot to at least pick up the phone and say, okay, what's realistic for us to give you? What do you guys want in return for a guy like Jamal Adams? I think there's really nothing to lose, especially if names really never come out. If they were intending of sending him a package that included a current Niners player on the roster, if the name never comes out, I don't think it'll really hurt anybody on the team, really. So I think I was a little bit surprised to hear that John Lynch never really picked up the phone just because of how he's been really aggressive since he joined the Niners as the general manager. He has been able to get guys like D Ford and Quan Alexander, Emmanuel Sanders in the middle of the season last year. And now he's having a whole offseason to kind of really reevaluate the team and see what kind of pieces are really sendable to another team. So I was surprised to hear. And I think it kind of makes sense now that we saw the deal with Seattle. I think it is true that he probably never really picked up the phone, because if that's how much he was probably hearing around the league, that's what it was going to take Jamal Adams. I think he kind of backed out and was like, you know what, that's a little bit too much for us to be able to go ahead and send to New York.
Potentially. But, I don't buy too much into the narrative that it was just to save Kowalski's confidence, because, I mean, come on, they did this to Jimmy. If you have no problem affecting the confidence of your starting QB, then you shouldn't have any problem with affecting the confidence of your starting strong safety, So I don't think that is too much of an issue, had too much to play into it. I still think you got to at least make the call, though. You have to at least see what that value is, or at minimum, and they got lucky in the circumstance that it seemed like Seattle just bid against themselves. But if, you are hearing that your division rival is pursuing this guy, you're going to want to make sure that value is as obscene as possible. You want to make sure that it is 2 first-rounders, a third-round pick, and a player. But, hey, maybe if they made that call, maybe that's 3 first-rounders. No, I'm kidding. It might be a bad move for them long-term, though. I mean, come on, giving away 2 first-rounders for a safety. With that said, these picks will be in the lower 20s. We do expect Seattle to be a contending team. So I don't think it's – the narrative out there is obviously that the Jets got 2 first-rounders. They're going to be top 15. As long as you got Russell Wilson and Pete, you're going to be fine. But how fine will they be? Because are they now the new division favorites? Are they going to lead the pack in the NFC West? I mean, you might have a little bit of a controversial view in this regard pre-Adams trade. Does this just reaffirm what your beliefs were?
Yeah, and for those that don't know what my beliefs were, whenever we first looked at the schedule, when it first released, I actually had the Seahawks sweeping the Niners in 2020 and then ended up going on to win the division. Of course, whenever you see a guy like Jamal Adams join the team, it kind of just, for me, reinforces the fact that I do believe that Seattle will win the division. I think roster-wise, the Niners probably have the better team. Vegas will probably have them as the favorites to win the division. And so will everybody else will probably have them as the favorites to win the division when you speak it in that terms. But for me, like you mentioned, if you have Pete Carroll there and if you have Russell Wilson and now you add a really, really, really spectacular talent like Jamal Adams, I think that just kind of reinforces where this team is going. And you kind of had to ask the question, and Colin Cowherd actually kind of asked the question whenever the news kind of broke. He talked about it the next day, was really, is it more of the Seahawks being scared of what they just saw in 2019, saying, okay, the Niners, they have a roster, they have dudes, and we can't really compete with them with the current roster that we have. So maybe that kind of played into the fact of them being, okay, we need to do something now. And if we had to sacrifice 2 future first-round picks and our starting safety to go ahead and make that move now, just because the Niners really, really showed up this past year and they took the division from us. So maybe that kind of played a factor into it, them saying, okay, we could sacrifice a little bit of the future because we have to make this move now. The Niners, they're still a young roster, and they're only going to get better. So that was kind of interesting for me to see for them to make that big of a move. Was it really because, obviously you want to get a guy like Jamal Adams, but was it more of okay, we need to do something to bolster up our own squad just because of what we saw in 2019 from the Niners?
But was this the right move to combat the Niners? Because the narrative has been put out there, oh, they went out there and acquired Jamal Adams as a Kittle stopper. Well, Jamal's a good coverage safety, but he's not really a great coverage safety. He's still smaller than George. It's not like they're both 6'5" themselves. George still has the size advantage there, and I don't think Adams wants to particularly get in his way if he's running. Didn't work out too well for the Saints. You can look up the highlights. So I don't think in that regard. But in terms of stopping the running game, if you want to talk about a box safety, if he can manage to break that zone running scheme of the Shanahans, and now the newly re-signed Raheem Mostert is running at full steam, then I don't know. Schematically, how do you think these teams match up on the field? Where do you think Adams plays the biggest role in stopping the Niners' offense?
I think you hit it right on the nail there, especially with the running game. We saw Kyle Shanahan kind of fall into the running game a little bit more towards the end of the regular season and definitely in the playoffs. So I think Pete Carroll and company were kind of looking into that and being like, okay, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's going to do what he's going to do. If we could stop the run and create a little bit more pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo and that front seven, which they still have really good players on that defensive line, and the linebacking core is still really good in Seattle. So I think they felt like they had that part of their defense covered. So now they really needed somebody who could really control their secondary, and they got that guy. So for me, as far as a game planning type of thing, now you're going to be able – Seattle's going to be able to be a little bit more aggressive as far as putting more guys in the box, as far as putting more guys closer to that line of scrimmage, because now you have a guy who could play, close to the line of scrimmage, or he could back up and actually help you out with coverage as well. With Jamal Adams, he's been able to show that in New York with, not really a great New York Jets defense around him. So now you surround him with a lot of, high IQ level players in Seattle. So I think – as far as a matchup standpoint, I think this really helps them a lot. I know it's just one player, and I know sometimes just adding one player in the secondary a lot of times doesn't make a difference. But I think with Jamal Adams, I think it is going to make a difference for them, and it is going to help them. And we might struggle a little bit more getting the running game going. You might see a little bit of different blitz packages that they could throw with Jamal Adams now that Seattle has to their disposal. So I think it's matchup-wise, it does benefit Seattle a little bit more having a talent like Jamal Adams there at their disposal.
For me, it's all going to be dependent on what they do with Clowney, or if Clowney can come back.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little bit tough for them to make that work now, but they have zero pass rush at the moment, or at least not a very known quantity at pass rush. So that is concerning, and I think that does limit how much Jamal Adams is really worth to this team. We're going to have to see what he also brings to this team in terms of personality, and whether or not he's going to be a little bit too headstrong for that coaching staff. We saw that, Russell Wilson definitely has more clout in the league than he did when he was with the Legion of Boom, but we did see that he butted heads with a lot of those star defensive tier players like Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor back in the day. That's still a point of controversy for the Seattle Seahawks. Was the Legion of Boom ultimately broken up to give more confidence in the team over to Russell Wilson? So we'll see how that is. I've heard some reports that Jamal Adams might already be stirring the pot over there in Seattle. So maybe it was just a personality and character standpoint why the Niners stayed away. But tell me, Faithful, what did you think? Do you think the Niners are still the favorites in the NFC West? Or do you believe, like this heathen over here, Jose Corral, that the Seahawks are now top dogs out west? Go ahead and let us know in the comments. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And speaking of those steamy rumors of Jamal Adams, I'm actually going to get a chance to talk to Grant Cohn, the person who first broke that, later on this week. So stay tuned for that. We actually also were on another podcast too that will definitely put all the links for you folks. We talk all things Niners. We represent our boys well. So Faithful, we hope you continue to listen. There's one topic each week, but there's probably more than 49 reasons to listen. Anyway, catch you guys later. Peace.